So Lauren in Florida, welcome to,
Yeah.
I almost said Women Seeking Wholeness because that would have just come right out, but Stand Speak Shine, I have to catch myself. Because, we had a turnover with my name and name change of
Oh,
the
I love
podcast.
it. Yeah.
So you are just this beautiful, grounded uh, young mom who has come into the space of an awakening around, I want to say womb power, but it goes beyond just the word power. And
Yeah.
so I would love for you to share with our listeners sort of that evolution of how this opened up for you. I know you said you were raised with a religious background, as most of us were. So yeah, maybe you and I were talking before a little bit about how this came into your path in terms of this feminine embodiment way of being and sharing with the world. So do you want to share with our listeners how that showed up for you?
Yeah. So, and thank you. Thank you for that reflection. I'm receiving it. And I would say that I think my entry point was becoming a mother. So my daughter's almost 5. She'll say she's 4.5, very like sternly. They're like so big into age. And I found out that I was pregnant in a really, I think, unexpected way. I think it was definitely divinely guided, but it wasn't planned. I had been with my partner, my now husband, for about 10 years up until that point, and I was in training to be a flight attendant with a pretty big US carrier. And about 2 weeks into training, I missed my period. And I kind of knew because I knew when I was ovulating and I knew what was happening when I was ovulating. So I think it was like unconsciously intentional between both me and my partner. And yeah, essentially I left training and my first trimester was really intense, both physically and then also just energetically and emotionally. I mean, I definitely found myself in like a really dark space. I felt that I lacked purpose and I had already like journeyed on spiritual development and just, I've had, different spiritual awakenings, and I had left the Catholic Church in which I was raised. Honestly, in middle school, like I really separated from that. I was like one of the only kids in my class that didn't get their confirmation, and I just never aligned with that path and the teachings. But I was like a rebel in a way where, I questioned God and I questioned spirituality. And then after college, I just got really spiritual and like understanding the universe and all of these things. So everything kind of, this feminine path, it's like this spiral. It's like everything kind of has come full circle in so many ways. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, we were living out in Denver at the time, and I made a really conscious choice to birth her out of hospital. And I was met by a pretty Western midwife that told me that I wouldn't be able to birth her out of hospital, even though I was healthy and young and the baby was healthy. And I had this woman who I was nannying for at the time, and she just was like, I've birthed a 9-pound baby out of hospital. You can do it, like, trust yourself. And it was kind of like, that mother energy of like ushering me in, like initiating me in the most beautiful way. So when we moved back to Tampa, my hometown, I found a beautiful midwifery and just had like this team of supportive women that were holding this vision for me. So I did end up birthing my daughter out of hospital. I also decided to begin my coaching company 6 months pregnant. So I started off as a spirituality and manifestation coach. So I've kind of been dancing in this path of being initiated as mother and also learning how to run a company without a business
That's a lot
background.
of
And
creation all at once.
yeah, and I swear that's the third trimester is like this big creation portal. And yeah, so my birth experience itself, I think, was like the big initiation into the womb path, because I got to 9 centimeters pretty quickly. And, my midwife only checked because I asked her to. And I essentially stalled out at 9 centimeters, and my daughter ended up flipping on me. So she was, sunny side up, which created really intense back labor for several hours. Like I would say like nine hours or so. I mean, I was like in and out of consciousness and like deep in labor land. And I was in the tub, and there was always this point in birth where you think you can't do it anymore. And I like had hit that point of like, you just need to take me to the hospital, like cut this baby out. It was just, it had become too much. And my midwife came up to me and she's like, you need to trust, like you have to surrender. You're fighting your contractions, you're fighting your body, you're fighting your baby coming out. And it was in that moment that I laid back and I actually, through my visual eye and just, between the veil so thin, I think when you're in the birth portal, that I saw Yeshua, Jesus, I saw Mother Mary, and I just felt this deep presence of God. And I hadn't used the term God in like 10, 12 years, and that was the moment that I was, ready to push and birth her out into the world. So without even like really knowing, that was like the first pathway. Becoming a mother really awakened me into realizing that there's a lot of generational trauma that I was carrying. So I was having like these instances where I was finding spiritual teachers and business mentors and, quote unquote gurus, and I was giving my power away. And I was, really like looking in that wounded maiden energy of looking for someone to save me. And about 9 months postpartum, I was just like, you know what? Like, I really need to figure out how to trust myself, how to trust my body, especially if I want to run a company. And I have to heal, the trauma of my ancestors and of my lineage for my daughter and for myself. So I simultaneously got trained in somatic trauma healing. And then I also like really wanted to understand energy and my intuitive psychic gifts. So I did mentorship to understand my channeling, and I got Reiki attuned and studied the Akashic record. So I kind of was like marrying the physical aspects of the body as well as, these spiritual, psychic, like quantum gifts. And about, I would say like a few months after that, I started diving into womb work. And, I realized like that's the portal, the womb is the bridge. We literally, as women, create life essentially out of nothing. And we have this ability to do it with everything that we desire and that we want out of life. So when I started really attuning back into my womb wisdom and my womb power, started, working with my pleasure portals and receptivity, it was like my business really expanded and grew. My relationship with my partner healed after we actually took a year apart. And in that year, I just like learned my body again and learned my desires and who I am as a woman. And we just got married in April, and our relationship is so beautiful. And who I am as mother is like all of these things kind of, not that it's perfect, but it's like there's such an anchoring. And I think it's because of that willingness to continue to spiral deeper into the womb and like really understand her medicine and be willing to walk the womb path, which isn't always easy. It's, she rips you open in the best ways.
Yes. Yeah. And labor is, whether it's a C-section or an actual labor of delivery, vaginal delivery, it's like there is a tearing, there is a point you think you can't do it. There is this, like you said, it's this it kind of like in between the veils, or the veils are thin, and walking between two worlds. And thank you for sharing all of that. I feel like, and especially the sacred experience you had when you just thought you couldn't do it anymore. And what I've as I've listened to many women tell their stories of why they're in the work they're in, it feels like they get to a point really where they don't know if they're crazy. And I include myself in this, or if they have the wherewithal to do it or the strength.
Yeah.
And so there's this threshold where you do have to surrender. Like there's no other way. Like you just have to let go. And you hear that a lot. Let go, just let go, surrender. And that was actually a trigger word for me for most of my life, because I thought it meant death. I thought it meant literal crucifixion. And actually it does, but that's another story. But when we're talking about this, as you speak of, there's this portal, there's this fork in the road, if you will. If you choose not to surrender, that's still okay. That's still what it is. It's still a choice that has some powerful lessons. The other end of that is we haven't been taught how to let go. We haven't really been taught how to surrender. We don't, it's just such a journey into the unknown. When you have a physical baby there, there's going to be a baby because, you're pregnant and you're in transition and you're laboring and you're ready to deliver this baby. But when it's something in the spiritual realm or the spiritual world, and you're not really clear on exactly what is being birthed, so to speak, like what's next, and what do I believe, and what do I say yes to, and how do I move forward? That's a very, so birth teaches us the physical part of that.
Yeah.
And then we get to look at, okay, what else is building to a crescendo that I need to surrender to in order to have, like, whether it's birthing a new level of consciousness or a business or whatever, a new relationship, whatever. I know when you and I were talking before that you mentioned that while you were breastfeeding your daughter, you found a really incredible resource that took you to the next level. So let's back up and talk about that, because you do have this beautiful like womb alchemy that I want to dive into and share what that is actually for you. But you also mentioned that, here you birthed this beautiful baby girl. And then while you're nursing her, and you have this sacred experience while you're birthing her, and then when you're nursing her, something else shows up.
Yeah. So, I mean, stepping into motherhood was, I think, the unknown, and also like running a company. There was a lot of unknowns with that, especially because you're going like a very non-traditional path. So I was invited from one of my girlfriends to read Mary Magdalene Revealed. And that was, I think, when Mary Magdalene really like came into the picture. And I remember reading it, and there was this essence of like deep love and compassion for the human experience. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that I gathered from it was, although I'm a highly spiritual individual, everything that I'm experiencing within my life, and I used to see, I don't know where this is going with it, but it's channeling in. So I used to see, emotions on a spectrum, right? It's like the Abraham Hicks thought process of, fear is bad and low vibrational. And then, you raise your frequency. Now, though I think you can raise your frequency in different ways, I had a lot of guilt and shame when it came to the human experience and emotions. And when Mary Magdalene stepped into my life and I started connecting with her energy and her spirit, it was like this deep love and compassion for the humanness of who I was. So I stopped having shame, and I started to alchemize that shame, the sexual shame from being raised Catholic, the shame around my body, the shame around pleasure, the shame around desires. All of that began to alchemize into, I would say, like the truth of my soul. So it's like my desires no longer were like coming from this egotistical place of like, I need to get somewhere in order to, receive validation, or, say that I did something because that could mean X, Y, and Z. It was like my business became this essence of my soul, and everything that I desired, how I wanted to be a mother, pleasure. Like that was the biggest thing for me, I think, with Mary Magdalene, was I started to understand, and, I've done so many teachings, or just have studied her, gone through priestess initiations with other priestesses, understanding the priestess lineage of Isis. And so like, I started to realize that there's this deep sexual energy, I think, within all women and within men. And that energy has been deemed as evil, as bad, as dark. And that's actually our life force. It's our creation portal. It's our ability to really co-create everything, and to have a truly intimate sexual experience is to surrender into the experience and to ride the waves of that experience. So it kind of took that essence. I mean, it's just like with labor, it's like there's waves of labor. The contractions come and then they go. You have a moment to breathe, and then it's, and it kind of builds up. And it's like, I realized like this is the pulse of life. The pulse of life is like learning how to like ride the waves of contraction and surrender, and just like not allowing it to mean anything, but continuing to just, allow yourself to be in the moment and to release any need to control. And I think why surrender is so feared is because we think, well, there's the fear of losing control, which control for so many of us means safety. I mean, that's what it meant for me, was to be in control means to feel safe. And I still have those moments, where my husband has to be like, babe, just take a breath, like you don't have to know it all. Right. So, but I think the biggest thing with surrender, I think that why so many of us fear it is because we think that surrender is passive. And surrender is actually like an active state. It's still doing the things, and I'll relate to this with business. It's like, it's still doing the things that have to be done in business. You can't just like wait around for clients to come into your programs. It's like, you have to launch the podcast, go live, like getting these inspired downloads and taking action on them. But it's just this surrendered state of like, the divine's going to provide for me and take care of me. And it's not my timeline. It's, the timeline of the universe. And I trust that. And I also trust my ability to co-create in a really beautiful way. I think another thing with like the womb mysteries, and this kind of, I want to speak to this, and let's see if like this kind of goes full
because
circle.
I think a lot of people, I think these words are coming up, a lot of people are talking about them. And I've seen, to be honest, like I've seen a lot of teachers try to commoditize this without a full understanding of what this actually is. So I'd love for you to share what that means to you.
What surrender means to me?
Well, no, the womb mysteries and what that actually, how that works into our material world, and just that bridging between worlds really with these mysteries.
Yeah. So I always think I wanted to use what you said about surrender and the crucifixion. I always think of like the story of Jesus and how he was crucified and then he resurrected in 3 days. And this is actually the power of Mary Magdalene. And she initiated him into understanding the depths of the underworld. And it's the same story with the Nana, where she went into the depths of the underworld and she allowed herself to, get raw and, essentially die in salvation in the sake of someone else. And that allowed this resurrection into, the Ka body, into the light energy. I think that now it's like we go through micro moments of that in our day-to-day. It's like we're constantly, and for whatever reason, whether it's the fact that it's, the earth is like ascending on such a rapid pace, or we're just like all in this initiatory energy where our bodies, and I'll say like our 4 bodies, our energetic, emotional, physical, and spiritual, it's like everything's kind of transcending right now, but we're going through these like micro initiations and these death portals. And to me, that's the womb mysteries, is being able to trust life and death, and being able to trust the darkness, and being able to allow yourself to descend and go into the darkness of the womb, because the womb is dark, right? The womb's dark. she's, moist and warm. And that's the space that we, birth life. But I feel like so many people are afraid of that for whatever reason.
They bypass
Yeah.
over the depth that is there, and
Yeah.
it have the appearance that they might be doing shadow work with you will, or they're incubating because like you said, the womb mysteries, like the cosmic womb, there's that. Then there's
Yeah.
like, we are the microcosm of the cosmic womb. And so it is dark, outer space is dark. The rich, deep soil of the earth is very dark. When you germinate anything, whether it's birthing a star and that expansion in the space, or whether it's, anything. The very first line in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is, what is matter? And that is such a deep, deep question. We're missing the first part of that. We're missing, I think, 6 pages or something prior to that. But anyway, I know that this means something different for every one of us, but what we're really talking about is the dark mother. And when I talk about the dark feminine and everything, it just conjures up
matter
evil.
is the mother.
Exactly. Matter, mother, mater, mother. So there are so many mysteries to this piece, but for me, and I want you to keep exploring on that, but I just want to, for the people listening going, wait a minute, like I was shown to stay in the light. Okay.
Yeah.
But that also connotes whatever the connotates, I don't know the word, that you actually need to turn on a flashlight, meaning you're already in a mystery. You're already in the dark. So for people to say, stay in the light, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's bypassing to always be in love and light, and to always have to be in the known that you can see and the light's illuminating it. And if you really want to go into the depth, darkness is depth. Depth is darkness. It doesn't mean horrible, bad, evil captivity that I was taught. And I'm not talking about exploitation or abuse or evil in the sense of that, in that respect.
Yeah.
But it can feel like you are in a birth canal being squeezed, and that you are, from the dark night of the soul perspective, in a state of being in the Garden of Gethsemane and suffering, or being on a cross. And so let's talk about that piece, just to give people that grounding into what it means to actually be in, not talk about, that be in, especially these initial stages of and being initiated into the womb mystery in that respect.
Yeah. Well, it is pretty dark. And I'm actually going to speak, and I haven't really shared about this because, and this in real time, I feel like for the past few months, I've been in another like really big initiation, and it's also been really dark and uncomfortable. And for me, it's always an opportunity to meet myself in the spaces where I don't really want to see. So in the spaces where I've held a lot of shame. And I love that you brought up the shadow work piece, because I feel like a lot of coaches and teachers, they're teaching shadow work from a very interesting perspective, where like the shadow's in the mind. And for me, the shadow is actually in the cervix, which is the birth canal. It is the opening into life, into the light, into, just this ability to, birth ourselves back out into the world. But we have to go through the cervix for birth. And so I always do shadow work with my clients, and with myself, I touch my cervix and I feel my cervix, and I sit with my cervix, and I ask her to show me, what are these parts of me that I've been unwilling to see? Where am I, giving my power away? Where am I not trusting myself? Where am I, trying to grasp on to control, and just, and then I like to take it a little bit deeper, because I also know through the womb work that I'm holding on to generations worth of my maternal line. And I think that that's sometimes where it gets really tricky for women, because There's a little bit, it feels like a burden sometimes, where it's like, man, I have to heal this for the women, you know, the women that have come before me. And for me personally, I'm willing to do that because of my daughter and because of the generations to come, you know, but it feels really sticky. It feels really, you know, constricted, I think, within our own body. And we have to, you know, the easiest way for us to alchemize is for us to sit with the constriction and to sit with the discomfort and to not try to push it out, to move it out. The body's going to do it quite naturally when we just allow ourselves to be in it. You know, it's really fascinating when we actually allow ourselves to be with the cervix or to be with parts of our yoni or to be with our body. And we just stay in those spaces without trying to extract anything from it, without trying to get anywhere with it. We just are there with it, with presence, with love, with, you know, intention. And we breathe, we give it what it needs. It just naturally alchemizes. And that doesn't mean it's like a quick fix, like you do the work and then it's completely done. It's like for these past, and this is like the interesting thing is I've had really amazing experiences these past few months. But for something specific that I'm calling into my life, there's a lot of deep somatic shadow work that I've had to do. And I've had to anchor back into trust and anchor back into my power. And it was so fascinating. I hosted a retreat actually in Sedona for my womb mystery school, Cosmic Rose. And I just got the intuitive hit.
What a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Cosmic Rose.
Yeah, thank you. I just got an intuitive hit and actually met with a colleague there, and her boyfriend suggested this woman to go receive healing from. So my husband went and he received healing while we were hosting the retreat. And I decided to book a session on the last day to, you know, clear my field and just to receive after holding the space. And she ended up doing, you know, it was like a blend of shamanic healing and craniosacral. And she was a bit of an elder. I love receiving from elders because there's like such deep wisdom and, you know, that crone-ship. And she did a lot of work on my right side and she did a lot of work in my womb. And I could feel it. She called in the spirit of my daughter. And that was like a very intense release. And she reflected back to me. She's like, you're doing the womb work because this is your path. This is what you're being asked to heal in this lifetime. And it was like kind of like an ego check of like, should I still be doing this work if I still have to heal more things? And she's like, you know, and I think she kind of sensed that. And she's like, no, you're still meant to do this work, but this is the work that you're being in it. Like you were called on this path. And it was just, you know, and what came through on that. And this has been something like the theme of my healing, the theme of my bleeds these past few months, the theme of like this big initiation that I'm stepping into is like really holding my power and not giving my power away to the wounded masculine because of past experiences, you know, with my father and my brother and things like that. But really like alchemizing the inner union and the trust of the masculine. So I think like this, I'm sharing this because this is what it's like to walk the womb mist path. There's no like, okay, you go on a 10-day healing and then you're fixed, or you do an ayahuasca retreat and then, you know, you get like full clarity. It's like the womb path to me is like deep devotion into this work. I think it calls women. And once you step into it, there's no way to bypass it. And she cracks you wide open. And she does show you the darkness, but the intention behind showing you the darkness is so that you can alchemize it and so that you can heal and so that you can, you know, really step into, and we're recording this on 8/8. So like what's been coming through with this 8/8 portal is like really stepping into like your solar light and your solar power and just, you know, being this, you know, like we come back to the light. We'll always come back to the light, but it's like, are you willing to go into the descent? Right. And dismantle and destruct whatever's needing to, you know, get out of your way. And I'm sharing this as someone that's like so in the void right now. And so in a space of contraction. And it doesn't mean, you know, I'm moping around and I'm sad. I cry when I need to. I express anger when I need to, and, you know, a sacred way. I have my moments, but I'm still here, you know, I'm still embodied, still able to serve. So I think that the feminine path is also like this ability to be in the both ands.
Yes, we
And
do
again,
walk between worlds. And
yeah.
what your healer elder woman said to you is so powerful. Like, you know, I think there's this belief, and I think we've been conditioned to think that you're not qualified to teach unless you have it all figured out or whatever, or you're like, it's tied up in a pretty bow, and look at that really powerful teacher who it's all tied up. Well, you have no, like, I only learned from people now who I know have been initiated into these womb mysteries. And it's not that they have to say that. It's not that they're even, you know, even knowing sometimes what that is, but there is just this resting, this embodied way about them that you kind of know they're coming from a place of deep knowing through experience. And we use this word initiation quite a bit. And interestingly enough, when you were talking about the book, Mary Magdalene Revealed, which came out, I think around 2019, I have my whole story with that. And I think, you know, there was something about 2017 to 2019 where this really just Mary Magdalene's consciousness, archetype, historical presence, like it all came into the field of human consciousness, like to a lot of women and men, I will say, all over the world, especially if you have a Christian tradition or you were raised in a church, into like healing sexual shame and childbirth and these womb mysteries and what it means to be initiated and embracing the human chaos and messiness and not buying into the shame story. That's where she seems to come in for a lot of people, in this color red, you know, blood and fire. And so it's very cauldron-like. It's very invitational and powerful and loving and fierce. And so, yeah, I wanted to insert that there. And I think you and I are both like, if you ascribe to kind of the old models of, hey, everybody, I'm going to show you how to do it. Like, or, hey, you know, let's work really hard and get this goal. And it just, I hate to use the word toxic masculine, but that's what it is. And it lives in each of us. And you said you had issues on your right side of your body. Usually we can look out and say, oh, it's out there. There's so much, but we've internalized it. And it was showing up in my body, my right side of my body, like crazy. Right hip, right foot, right breast, right everything.
The right ovary. I just taught, and I do temples, and essentially in Cosmic Rose, each temple is a descent into the feminine body. And the last temple, and like I let it channel in, and the temple that I just taught was all about the right ovaries or solar ovary and like this, the inner masculine. And I work with so many women where that's where they have cyst, or, you know, they'll get like the twitching in their right ovary or a lot of pain there. And it's that imbalance of the masculine and feminine, and this relationship we have with the wounded masculine or the toxic masculine, and like that control, the overbearing, the aggression, you know.
And what's like we're fighting inside of ourselves, and we're also a reflection of the culture. Okay, so a little bit of my history with this. So before I had children, I would get a lot of cysts on my ovaries. One time I had one the size of a lemon. One time I had one the size of a grapefruit. Surgery both times, laparoscopic surgery. And one was on my right ovary and nicked one of my fallopian tubes. And they told me I would be at risk for an ectopic pregnancy. But anyway, so then I have a C-section after that. And then I have 3 vaginal births. And then I had 4 miscarriages in a row with D&Cs each time. And so they had a lot of trauma. And by the way, the children that I delivered in the natural way, you could say, were really, really hard because my cervix would not dilate. So I had to have Pitocin even my son that was 10 days overdue.
Wow.
It was just so much intervention and so much of me not knowing. Like I look back and I feel really bad for myself. Like I wanted children so badly, and I didn't trust my body. I wasn't really shown how to surrender, even in
Yeah.
Lamaze and those things I took. And from a spiritual, I guess from a spiritual standpoint, and I just trusted the medical professionals and all of that. And so each time I had all this trauma, and so it wasn't until a couple years ago that I really looked at what was going. And this is after me having all these awakenings and doing all these mystery schools and teaching and podcasting and the whole thing and writing. But I finally reckoned with this trauma. And I was at Chalice Well, actually, in Glastonbury.
Wow.
And I, for the first time, and this is all connected to the Magdalene and Glastonbury, it's in and of itself is kind of this mecca for, as you know, just feminine mysteries. And it's considered like the heart chakra of the world. And I was in a mystery school, and this was our culminating trip. And I had one other American there besides me. They were all these beautiful European women who were sort of understanding this priestess path. And we all had this heart of service. And so I'm standing over the Chalice Well, and for the first time, the white spring, and there's also a red spring there, but I just felt purity. I felt my true essence, and had a womb blessing, and it was just really, really beautiful. I have a lot of ancestors from England, so I was able to channel my ancestresses who had very varying degrees of trauma of coming to the US under false pretenses and all these things. But I share that because there's intergenerational trauma that rests in that region, but it's also our portal to power, as you mentioned. And one of the things that's been so hard for me, especially on the deconstruction path, and maybe you can speak to this as well, is that there's a persecution that ensues when you go into the space of the unknown, that people from more dogmatic systems or institutions who are still part of that you can't trust yourself paradigm, and you're going to be overcome, and it's just that there's a persecution, and that's the best word I have, of see, like your life's kind of falling apart. If you were really in the light and you were really making the best choices, you wouldn't be having this pain or be in this dark place. So I cannot tell you every single woman that I have talked to who has tried to claim her voice and her power. There has been a person, even especially I would say by other women.
Yeah.
So do you want to speak to that a little bit and what that's about?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it has to do with how women in their power have been treated for centuries. And I think Mary Magdalene's a beautiful example of this. Mary Magdalene was a woman deeply in her power. And, she was the beloved of Yeshua. And she also had a lot of courage, a knowing, even when she met him, that he would die and he would be, and what that would create. I mean, depending on what you believe, I believe she was pregnant when he died and she had to go into hiding, and she went in hiding for the rest of her life. And that's the story of women. The story of women is that we have to go into hiding. And if we claim our power, then there's a fear of us being persecuted. And, we also see that reflected out in witch trials. We see that in the stories of the goddess, where, a lot of these stories of, Lilith and Eve and all of these, really divine feminine goddesses, they're seen as evil in modern day society, and they're seen as something to be feared. And we hear of the sirens and these muses and these enchantresses, and they use manipulation and sex tactics to
The seductress archetype.
lure men into dark spaces and death. And like, this is the story that's been told of women. And So
And
I think that's
really,
what,
like, Eve is taking Adam by the hand and giving him the apple. As women,
yeah,
we are taking our divine beloved partners, and we are, just as Mary Magdalene was initiating Christ prior to his burial,
yeah,
or crucifixion. We are taking the masculine, the divine masculine by the hand and
mhm,
taking them through thresholds and
yeah,
and deepening into emotion and deepening into shadow. And
yeah.
yeah, so
With the
that's a whole
intention though, and this is where it gets, I think, I think that this is where the illusion lies, is that it's with the intention to come back into love and come back into the heart so that the masculine can lead from heart rather
mhm.
than leading from this space of control and, overtaking, and just this space of, the wounded, like this, I don't like saying like dismantle the ego or allow the ego to die, because I think the ego plays a really important role in our lives and keeps us safe and all of these things. But it's like coming from this really egoic space that doesn't care about society, doesn't care about children, doesn't care about women,
Or the
things
earth.
like that,
Yeah.
or the earth, just the mother energy in general. So, what I see with women that have a lot of the symptoms that you had of hard childbirths, a lot of trauma
A lot of
within the
pregnancy
wombs.
loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ovarian cysts, just all of these different ways in which this trauma is manifesting in the physical body. And it's manifesting in a really interesting way right now because we're seeing it on such a global scale with high levels of infertility. I mean, pregnancy loss is at an all-time high right now. We're witnessing it. Women with PCOS, infertility issues, painful periods, all of this. And, the masculine way is get on pills, get surgery, just
Mhm.
eradicate it in these ways. And I believe, although I'll say this it's a really nuanced, right? Like it's such a nuanced situation. So I'll never say just bypass Western medicine. I think that there's a time and a place for Western medicine, but never to take away from the intuitive wisdom that's held within the womb space. And I believe that if the womb is speaking out in those ways, then that's the womb essentially crying out to be heard
Mhm.
and seen and to be reconciled with. And there is a deep burden right now on women at this time to do this healing, because essentially it's now or never. And
It's all
for,
culminating to this place where, you know, really, and I love this imagery of a midwife, because
yeah,
I look at my mentors who came through when I was in this dark feminine cave.
yeah,
They midwifed me through
mm.
that. And it's so gentle, but it's also so fierce. And they
I
were
want to
very
talk about
bold
that
with
for a
me. Yeah,
second.
please do.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
want to
interesting.
talk about the midwifing because that's how I feel. That's how I feel as well with my mentors. And that's why I think, whereas when I was in a wounded feminine space and I was looking for someone to save me, and there was no room for midwifing, because I was looking at these coaches and these mentors as the end all be all and the saviors to come in. Whereas the role of a midwife is not to save a woman from labor, the experience of labor, just like the role of a midwife in these big transitional periods, these big thresholds, even within business. Like I see myself more as a business midwife rather than a business
Yes.
coach.
That's how I feel about
Because
what I'm doing too. It's like a guide. It's
yeah,
not a,
yeah. And
yeah.
it's like we usher women through the threshold. We usher women into the birth portal. We usher them into full possibility of what gets to be through them. And with it comes this ability to, witness them in the contraction and the expansion, and to hold them with fierce love and compassion, and also to call them forward as their most powerful selves so that they can, take this, path and run with it, So
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up, just the midwife thing. Cause I'm like, it just speaks so much, I think, to this work. And, I've seen so much in the coaching industry. And I think I had that experience so early on in my coaching industry where I gave my power away. And it was so fascinating because I gave my power away to a woman that was really marketing herself as a priestess. And it was very much marketing. And, you know, I held this woman at high regard, like she's going to be the one. And she made a lot of money. And I see so many women doing this. And it's just like, to me personally, I don't want to save anyone. I just want to, I want to be there to support you. And and I feel like I had that experience. And this is the potency of initiations. It was initiation within itself, because I had this experience where I gave my power away and I was deeply disappointed and hurt, but it was like this call to action for me to learn how to trust my body, to trust myself, my intuition, and just to have discernment. And I had never known that. So I think as well, kind of like tying this all together with this deep persecution that we feel is, I think we have to have a little bit of like discernment. You know, if I see a woman that's in the darkness and life is chaotic and, you know, things feel as though they're falling apart, or, you know, I work with a lot of coaches and entrepreneurs and healers. So maybe they haven't signed a client in a while. Maybe their business is like, feels like it's catching on fire. I just see it as like, it's an opportunity. Like what, you know, like trust the pivots, trust the changes, trust yourself. And like, it's just a call for you to anchor back into your power. And, you know, I think that as women, we have to witness, and like, there's so much healing and witnessing another woman in the vulnerability. It heals the sister wounding on such a deep level, where, you know, we used to birth together. We used to walk through life together. We would bleed together. And it's just, like I don't, womb to womb, heart to heart. It's like, I see you.
It's tribal.
You know?
It's primal and tribal with women. I want to come back to, as we kind of wrap this up, the connection between a woman's voice and her womb wisdom or womb power, or, you know, the biocompatibility, if you will, of those two portals, and when you are disconnected, how it affects the other.
Yeah. So physically they mirror each other. It's really fascinating to see the vulva, like a map of the vulva and the cervix opening and the throat opening. It's why in birth and also in, you know, ecstasy and orgasm, women tend to be really expressive and vocal. It creates like this really primal, wild essence within a woman, just like we were speaking about. It's been shut down for centuries. The voice of women has really been muted and suppressed. And I have yet to meet a woman that doesn't feel like this caging in, or like that strangling, that pressure within the throat. And because I do the somatic work, it's really fascinating, because those same women tend to also have really constricted, tight yonis, where the yoni itself should really be subtle and light, or supple and open and soft. So there's like this deep, there's the physical aspect, but it's like this deep energetic mirroring of what's happening in the yoni and what's happening in the construction of their voice. And it's really interesting because, you know, we are women that have podcasts and are online, and we're creating, you know, these social media presences. And yet there is this like deep underlining thread of being canceled, of people not liking us, of saying the wrong thing, and like shutting ourselves down, you know, and not saying the thing we want to say. And I think it kind of like came to light in 2020 when, you know, people were speaking out about things. And if you said the wrong thing, or if you didn't go with the masses, then you were deemed something. And I think that that's what we're healing right now in a really big way. And I think it's really beautiful that we have these platforms right now for women to activate their voice and to share their truth and to be authentic. But for me, it's like, and this is why I do the hands-on work with women, is we unlock those codes in the yoni, and we soften the yoni. We teach her that it's safe to surrender. It works with the nervous system as well. So the cervix is directly connected to the vagus nerve. So that's why I love doing cervical work and why I think cervix work is shadow and this like direct thread, but it creates a level of safety in us that, you know, we can channel these codes and speak our truth and share a story and be vulnerable and open. And we're not going to be killed anymore. We're not going to be, you know, shut down.
It might be social suicide in some of your circles, but other than
Yeah,
that,
but maybe they're not the
then
circles
they're
you
not
should be
your,
in.
they're not your tribe. They're not your people. It's not your.
And we find that, I think that this is like the sisterhood. I think it's why, again, you know, masterminds, mystery schools, whatever, like
Chatting
whatever
in
you
circles.
have
Yeah.
capacity for, it's like get into those spaces, get into the, and we now have like the technology to, you know, like you're in Utah, I'm in Florida. I feel like we've definitely been priestesses together, walked this path for many lifetimes together. And here we are having this conversation. So I feel like it's healing right now. And I feel like it's healing in a really big way. And I remember, I'll end with this. When we first moved out to Colorado, I went to Boulder Psychic Institute to receive a reading from one of the trainees, and she had her eyes closed the whole time. And she did like a chakra channeling, and it's so fascinating because she told me my root was completely shut down. I was like, how do I work with my root? So obviously the thread is there. But she told me that my throat was like blasted wide open, but it looked like there was a cage, like my throat was in jail and there was a cage around it. And she's like, again, it's the masculine. She's like, it feels like this masculine has just locked your throat away. And it was my experience in my life as a little girl of being told to be quiet, being told to not speak, only speak when you're spoken to, all of these things. I witness my daughter now, who is very vocal and very strong-willed and has big energy. And it's interesting to be able to parent her and like honor her in that, and also obviously set boundaries and things like that. But it's such a beautiful mirror. But I was never given the opportunity. So it took me years. That was, you know, when I was 25, it took me years to feel safe to say the things that I say online now, and to be seen in the way that I'm seen now. And, you know, I've been on stages, go live, like all of these things that I think some women are still afraid of, going live, starting the podcast, doing the YouTube channel, sharing your gifts, you know, channeling, like
women
all
have
of these things.
That's the paradox. Women have a deep need for visibility,
express,
like to see me. Yeah. An expression for sure. But the paradox is it's also our deepest fear. It's our deepest craving and our deepest fear at the same time.
Yeah, this is so good. I got to say thank you, because I was dancing between two different free master classes to host, and I was going to do it on receiving. And something came in these past 2 days of you need to do something on visibility and being seen. So thank you. I appreciate
that's the stand, speak, shine. There's a huge piece of it. It's like, it's one thing to say to someone, I love you. And it's a whole other thing to say, I see you. Yeah. It's a deeper way of unconditional love and compassion. And we need to do this for ourselves. And
it starts with us.
It really does. Well, this has been so great, Lauren. And I know you have offerings coming up, and you're in this, even though you are in maybe a new germinating period of your life, or you're kind of in an unknown void. Thank you for showing up, because that's when you get the clarity. You know, it's when you get the clarity is when you are vulnerable and you are, you know, voicing. So that's where you get your knowing, is through the voice.
Yeah, it's meeting my edge and being in the unknown and in the season of the void, and also still being seen and showing up and just being authentic and vulnerable. And I think that's where the surrender comes in. It would be really sad if I was just in bed crying, feeling sorry for myself.
Sometimes you need days like that, though.
I'm like, well, I definitely have days. You know, I had a moment where I just, in the kitchen, I was with my husband, and I had a tough moment with my daughter, and I just melted. I melted in the arms of my husband, and my daughter was right there just witnessing me melt. And, you know, and what's so fascinating is it deepened the intimacy with each one of us, because I allow them to see me rather than carrying that burden. So there's a lot of lessons right now I feel like I'm learning. I mean, I'm 33. I just turned 33 in June. I feel like it's my Jesus year.
It's your
So
Jesus year.
I'm
Yeah, that's when the
trusting,
ministry starts. There's something about that
yeah,
portal.
you know,
Yeah,
so I'm just trusting and I'm in a portal and it's going to deepen my work, my ability to serve women. And so I'll let myself be here for a while and I'll be okay.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Where
thank
can
you.
people find you online, Megan? Where's the best place?
Yeah, so you can find me at I am Lauren Megan, and
And
just on
that's Instagram.
Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just I share a lot of stories. I just started like an inner circle channel, like broadcast channels. So I plan on like sharing downloads and channels there. And yeah, my intention is just to really grow my Instagram community. I have a YouTube and a podcast as well. The podcast is called Womb Wealth and Wellness. And you can also find all of my offerings. I have the mystery school and also a mastermind right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time today. This was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.